Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel once again. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you how to make a cargo pants with an elastic waistband. So if this is something you're interested in learning, keep watching. And if you're interested in learning how I made this shirt, so you can pair it as a two-piece with the cargo pants, I'll be dropping the link to the shirt making in the description box. So let's get started with the cargo pants. The name of the fabric I used is called an Adire fabric, and I made use of 2.5 yards. The first step is to draft the front piece. So I folded this fabric into two. To know the wideness of the fold you need for the front piece, you divide your hip circumference by 4 inches and then you add extra 5 inches to that. The next step is to rule the starting line, which is also called the waistline. Now from the waistline, I'll deduct my waistband, which is 1.5 inches. Still maintaining the tape on the waistline, I went ahead to mark my hip line. After my hip line, the next line I marked is my crotch line. Now I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. To mark the tie line, I would place my measuring tape from the crotch depth line to mark 2 inches, and then I would go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. So now to mark the full length of my pants, I place the measuring tape from the waistline again, and my desired full length for my pants is 42 inches. So I added extra 2 inches sewing allowance to the hem, which made it 44 inches altogether. I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. So since an elastic band would be inserted in the entire waist circumference, then I would just work with my hip circumference. On the waistline from the center of the fold, I placed my hip circumference divided by 4 inches and I added extra 1 inch sewing allowance to that. On the hip line, I would also mark my hip circumference plus additional 1 inch to that, and I'll do the same for the crotch depth line. Now I'll go ahead to connect these 3 points together to form this straight line. To get your crotch extension, you should place the measuring tape on your crotch line from this point to the center of the fold, and then you divide the measurements you have there by 4 inches. So I got 2.6 inches. Now I placed my measuring tape after the line here to mark 2.6 inches. The next thing I did was to use my curve ruler to extend this new point to meet this straight line here. Make sure that the curve isn't too deep. Now on the tie line, I would place my tie circumference divided by 2 inches plus 1 inch extra allowance. Now I would connect the tie circumference to meet the crotch extension as shown. Now I placed my measuring tape on the tie circumference to measure what I have, which is 13 inches. I'm going to go ahead to place this 13 inches on the hem because it's a straight pant, and then I would connect the tie circumference to meet the hem circumference. After you have done this, the next step is to cut out the front piece. So I mistakenly did not film when I was cutting out the front piece, so just follow the direction of the chalk to cut out the front piece. And after cutting out the front piece, this is how it should be looking. And do not forget to slit the center fold of this front piece so that you'll be having 2 pieces. The next step is to make the back piece, and I folded this fabric into 2. Make sure that this folded fabric is wider than the one you used for the front piece. Now I'll go ahead to place my front piece directly on the back piece. So what I'm doing now is to make sure that the center fold of the front piece is 2 inches away from the center fold of the back piece. And this is because the back piece of a pant is always bigger than the front piece of a pant. So the next step is to increase the waistline of your back piece by 1 inch above the waistline of the front piece. So I'll be doing this at the top of the crotch curve. Now on the center fold of the front piece, I'm going to extend the waistline to meet the center fold of the back piece, and then I would create a mark there to connect this new mark to meet the top of the crotch line on the back piece. So this is very important, especially for someone that has a very big butt. If you don't increase the waistline on the back piece, you'll find out that the front piece would be dragging down the waistline for the back piece. So on this side, I'll go ahead to cut out the exact shape for the crotch curve, and then I'll continue cutting the sides here. Now, after cutting out the back piece, the next step is to slit the center fold of the back piece. So if I should adjust the center fold of my front piece to meet the center fold of the back piece, you'd realize that the back piece is actually larger than the front piece, and that is how it should be. So for now, we'll be working with just the front piece of the pants. To fix the inner side pocket of the front piece, I'll go ahead to place my measuring tape from the center fold on the waistline here to mark 2.5 inches, and then I'll place my tape from the waistline vertically downwards to mark 7 inches to connect the width of the pocket opening to the length of the pocket opening. After cutting, I'm going to keep this little piece in a safe place because I'll be using it later. And the next step is to make the pocket itself. So I folded this fabric into two, and the length of the fabric is 12 inches, while the width of the fabric is 14 inches. The next step is to place the front piece of my pants directly on this folded piece below. And then I'll go ahead to trace out the pocket opening on this side to trim out following the direction of the pocket opening. And then since the fabric is folded into two, I would slit the fold open. So now I have two separate pockets. So now to attach the pockets, I took out one of the front piece and I placed the right side of the pocket directly on the front piece to stitch the pocket opening by 1/2 inch. After stitching the pocket opening, I flipped the pocket to the wrong side of the front piece, and then I'll take this to the sewing machine to make a straight stitch 1/2 inch away from the pocket opening. So this is the stitch I've made, and then I would adjust the pocket and fold the pocket into two. Now remember the little piece that was initially cut out from the pocket opening, which I said you should keep safely. I'm going to replace it now on top of this side of the pocket, making sure that it's of the same measurements. So I'll be adjusting the front piece to make sure that it's of the same measurements now. So obviously it's already equal. I'll go ahead to pin the front piece to the pocket below. Now I would flip the front piece upwards so that you can see the pocket below, and I would stitch the ends of the pockets by 1/2 inch following the direction of the chalk. And I would also stitch the waistline on the top of the pocket. The waistline on the front piece has been properly secured to the top of the pocket, and the bottom of the pocket has also been secured properly as well. And I repeated the same sewing process for the second front piece. So now I've cut out the patch pocket which will be attached to the front piece of my pants. The lower pocket is 8 inches in length and the width of the lower pocket is 7 inches. Please take note of that. Now for the pocket cuff, the length is 4 inches while the width is 7 inches as it is for the lower pocket. You should note that the lower pocket is a single piece and I replaced it for the second pocket, and the pocket cuff is 2 pieces and I replaced it for the second pocket as well. So I'll start by placing the right side of the fabric on each other for the pocket cuff, and then I'll secure the edges of the pocket cuff by 1/2 inch following the direction of my chalk. So I'm also going to repeat the same sewing process for the second cuff. Now for the lower pocket, I flipped the pocket to the wrong side of the fabric and I folded the top of the pocket inward by 1/4 inch, and I further folded it by 1/4 inch to stitch directly on the edges of the fold. After stitching, I'm going to turn the top of the pocket over by 1 inch to the right side of the pocket, and then I would stitch this side down and to stitch this other side. After stitching, I'll go ahead to use my scissors to notch the top of the stitching here. The next thing I did is to turn the top of the pocket. After this is done, you realize that it has automatically folded the edges of the pocket here by half an inch. So I would use my pressing iron to fold the edges of all the pockets. So I folded all the edges properly. The next step now is to flip this pocket to the wrong side, and I'll stitch directly on these already made stitches here. Make sure you are stitching directly on the stitch that was made already. So after stitching, this is how the pocket would be. Now I'm going to go ahead to turn the pocket cuff to the right side of the fabric. After turning the pocket cuff to the right side of the fabric, I'm going to give it a quick press. Now I took the pocket cuff to the sewing machine to top stitch the edges half inch away from the folded edges. After stitching the edges of the pocket cuff, I repeated the same sewing process for the second patch pocket. So now to attach the patch pocket to the front piece of your pants, you would have to bring out the inner pocket, because if you do the mistake to stitch directly on your inner pocket, it simply means that the pocket will be closed and you won't be able to insert your hand. Now to place the lower pocket, I placed my measuring tape from the waistline vertically downwards to mark 9 inches. Now from the crotch depth curve, I would place my measuring tape to mark 3 inches away, and I'll go ahead to place my lower pocket on this angle. The next step is to pin the pocket to the front piece. So I'll go ahead to stitch the sides of the pocket following the direction of my finger. Now to place the pocket cuff, I would mark half an inch away from the pocket opening, and then I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. Now I'm going to place my pocket cuff directly on this new line. After placing the rough edges of the pocket cuff on this line, I stitched by 1/4 of an inch, following the direction of my chalk. After stitching the patch pocket, this is how it should be. Now I'm going to close the pocket cuff because I want to top stitch directly on the top so that this seams here can be closed. I'll stitch by half an inch from the top of the pocket cuff, and after stitching realize that the seam below the pocket cuff has been properly closed. Now I can go ahead to flip back my inner pocket. You can see that if I had left the inner pocket that way, it would have been closed. Alright, I repeated the same sewing process for the second front piece. So that is all for the front piece for now. Now the next step is on how to attach my cargo pocket to the back piece of my pants. So I have a tutorial already on my YouTube channel on how to make a cargo pocket. So I'll be dropping the link in the description box for you to learn how I made this cargo pocket. So now to attach the cargo pocket to the back piece of the pants, I placed my measuring tape from the waistline to mark 4 inches, and I ruled a straight line across that point. And from the crotch curve, I would place my measuring tape to mark 4 inches as well. Now at this point where the two lines meet is where my cargo pocket would be placed. Now I'm going to place the cargo pocket flat to trace out the shape of the pocket. After tracing out the shape of the pocket, the edges of the cargo pocket, that's from the band where I've already folded with my pressing iron, would be placed directly on this line I traced out to stitch the edges by 1/4 of an inch. So I'll keep stitching by 1/4 of an inch directly on the folded edges till I get to this point. After the edges of the pocket has been stitched, I marked half an inch above the pocket opening to rule a straight line across this point, and I went ahead to place the rough edges of the pocket cuff directly on this line to stitch by 1/4 inch following the direction of my chalk. So once the lower pocket has been stitched, the next thing I did was to fold the edges of the lower pocket into two equally on this side, and then I'll take this to my sewing machine to make a straight stitch from the top of the pocket here up to about 1 inch, and I'll do the same for the other side as well. So this would give the pocket a very nice shape. After this is done, I would go ahead to fold my pocket cuff to the right side to stitch by 1/2 inch away from the top so that it can hold the seam below. So I've attached the cargo pocket to the both sides of my back piece. Now the next step is to place one side of my front piece directly on the other side of the back piece, right side to right side facing each other. Then I'll take this to the sewing machine to stitch the edges on this side by 1 inch following the direction of my chalk. And for the other side of the pants as well, I'll be placing the front piece of the pants directly on the back piece of the pants, right side to right side facing each other, to stitch this side by 1 inch following the direction of the chalk. After stitching the sides of the pants together, this is how one of the leg would be, and this is how the second leg would be. So the next step is to make the side pockets that would be at the side of the knee. Now for the lower pockets, the length is 9 inches, while the width is also 9 inches. For the pocket cuff, kindly ignore the paper stay that was placed on it, except your fabric is very light. But in my own case, I already had a fabric that had a paper stay on it, so it was quite difficult to remove the paper stay. The length of the cuff is 4 inches, while the width is 9 inches as it is for the lower pockets. So the next step is to make two straps that will be attached to the pocket cuff. So this is my strap here. I've already sewn it because I joined the pieces of this fabrics together and there was no way I was going to explain it, but it's just a normal strap. The width of the strap is 2 inches and the length is 16 inches. Alright, once you have your strap ready, I'm going to fold my pocket cuff into two to notch the center. Now I'll go ahead to pick the strap to fold the rough edges of the strap into two to notch the center as well. Now I would place this rough edges directly on this notched part of the cuff this way to place the right side of both cuff on each other. Now I'll take the cuff to the sewing machine to stitch the sides by 1/2 inch following the direction of my finger. And I also repeated the same sewing process for the second pocket cuff, and this is how it should be. I'll go ahead to turn the cuff to the right side of the fabric. Now I took the pocket cuff to the sewing machine to stitch the edges 1/4 inch away from the folded edges following the direction of my finger. The next step is to work on the lower pocket. Now I'm going to flip my pocket to the wrong side of the fabric to stitch the top of the pocket in by 1/4 inch and further fold it in by 1/4 inch. After stitching the top of the pocket, I'm going to flip the top of the pocket over by 1 inch on the right side of the pocket to stitch this edge together by 1/2 inch and to also stitch this edge by 1/2 inch as well. After stitching, I turn the top of the pocket to the right side. Now I'm going to use my pressing iron to fold the edges of the pocket in by 1/2 inch. After ironing the lower pocket properly, I flipped the pocket to the wrong side. Now I took this pocket to my sewing machine to make a straight stitch directly on this stitch that is here already. So after stitching the top of the pocket, this is how it should be. And you can also see that I repeated the same sewing process for the second pocket. Now the next step is on how to attach this pocket to the pants. So this is one leg of the pants. I'm going to adjust it upward, and then on this patch pocket, which is directly placed on the front piece of this pants, I would place my measuring tape from the end of the patch pocket to mark 5 inches. Now I'm going to bring the lower pocket and then fold it into two equally. I'll use my chalk to mark the center of the folded pocket. I'll place it directly on this joining that meets both the front piece and the back piece. Then I'll go ahead to pin the pocket directly on it to stitch the sides of the pocket following the direction of my finger. After stitching the sides of the lower pocket, I placed my measuring tape above the lower pocket to mark ½ inch, and then I went ahead to place the rough edges of the pocket cuff directly on this line to stitch by ¼ inch following the direction of the chalk. After stitching, the next step is to close the pocket cuff and top stitch at the edges by ½ inch away from the top of this edge. So once that is done, this is how the side pocket by the nail should be. So I repeated the same sewing process for the second pocket and I attached it on the second pants leg. Now the next step is to place the second pants leg directly on this pants leg placed on my table, right side to right side facing each other, and then I'll go ahead to stitch the crotch curve together following the direction of the chalk by 1 inch, and I would also stitch this other side of the crotch curve by 1 inch as well. After stitching, I notch the edges of the curve by ½ inch. After stitching the curve, I'll go ahead to arrange the pants straight, and then you would notice that the back piece is moving towards the front piece, and the reason is because the back piece of the pants is bigger than the front piece of the pants, which is very okay. So the next thing I did was to align the joining which is under the crotch curve, making sure that the joining is directly on each other. I pinned them together and I also pinned the sides of the pants here. I'll stitch the legs of the pants following the direction of my chalk by 1 inch, and I'll keep stitching till I get to the center where the joining meets at the crotch curve, and then I'll keep stitching so I get to the other end. After stitching, I turned the pant to the right side of the fabric, and this is how it should be. So this is my inner side pocket, this is my patch pockets at the front of the pants, and this is my side pocket which is by the nail side. And I flipped the pant to the back piece, and this is my cargo pocket here. So altogether we have 8 pockets on this pant. The next step is on how to make the elastic waistband. So what I'm going to do is to place my measuring tape from the center of the crotch line to take the measurements of the entire waist circumference. So the waist circumference on this pant is 42 inches. So this simply means that the width of the waistband should be 42 inches, but because of joining allowance I added extra 1 inch to that, which made it 43 inches altogether. Now remember that during the drafting process of the front piece I deducted 1.5 inches from the waistline, which would be replaced later as the waistband. So because this is an high waist pant, if you're adding extra inches to the waistband it doesn't matter. So now I want the length of my waistband to be 6 inches, because after folding and sewing it will become 2.5 inches. Now for the elastic band, the width of this elastic band is 2 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead to fold the waistband right side to right side facing each other, and then I'll stitch this edge to close it up by 1 inch. After stitching, I would fold this band into two equally using my pressing iron to make a quick press. After this was done, I unfolded it again and then used my pressing iron to fold one of the edges inward by 1/2 inch. After I was done folding one of the edges of the waistband, I folded the waistband into two. And then the next step is to attach the waistband to the waist circumference of the pants. Now, the side of the waistband that wasn't folded at the edges would be placed on the wrong side of the waistline to stitch all through by 1/2 inch, following the direction of my fingers. After stitching the edges of the waistband on the waist circumference, I folded the waistband into two towards the right side of the pants, and then I'll go ahead to stitch the edges of the waistband in such a way that it covers the seam allowance. And then I'll just keep stitching. I'll keep stitching the edges of the waistband, and when I get to almost the center, I would leave a space of 2 inches where the elastic band would be inserted into. So for the waistband, I'll be working with my actual eye waist circumference. My eye waist circumference is 29 inches, but I would have to subtract just 1 inch from that, and that will be 28 inches. This simply means that the width of my elastic band should be 28 inches. Now, I'm going to go ahead to insert this elastic band into the elastic casing. Please and please make sure that you only subtract 1 inch from your actual waist measurements when you are inserting this elastic into the elastic casing. So the reason why I subtracted only 1 inch is because I'll be stitching directly on the elastic. But if you do not want to stitch on your elastic, then just subtract 5 inches from your actual waist measurement to insert the elastic inside the elastic casing. So once you have inserted the elastic, you would join the two ends of the elastic together to stitch by 1/2 inch. And after stitching, you would insert the elastic into the elastic casing properly to close the opening. So I've done that. Now to make your first stitch, you should place the needle 1/4 inch away from the top of the elastic. And then after that, you keep making a distance of 1/4 inch from each stitches. So just make sure to keep drawing the waistband while stitching. So I'm almost getting to the point I started the first stitching. And then when I get there, I would close the stitch properly, and I would place my needle 1/4 inch away from the first line to make the second stitches. So I'll keep stitching the same process, and when I get to, I'll just keep stitching. I think I made about 5 lines. So when I get to that point where the waistband is attached to the waist circumference of the pants, I would just stitch 1/4 inch above that joining. So this is exactly how the waistband would be. You can see how beautiful it is, and it came out really nice, and it's very comfortable. Trust me, very, very comfortable. So the final step is to fold the pants equally to measure where you want the length of your pants to be. I want mine to be on 42 inches. The reason I'm doing this is to make sure that both legs are equal, and then I'll just fold in the extra allowance at the bottom. I'll take this to my sewing machine to secure the hem properly. Alright guys, we've come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and if you are new to my channel, please subscribe, share and like my videos. And if you haven't followed me on Instagram, please do so at Stylemebynancy. Thank you, and see you in my next tutorial.